Wait, you eat things that can still fight back? Was how orientation started. The room went quiet, and 24 alien eyes turned toward the only human in the Academy auditorium. Lucas Reed smiled, holding up his lunch tray. On it was something that sizzled, smoked, and frankly terrified the gelatin-based life form sitting beside him. "It's called steak," he said casually, "from an animal that could kill you if you didn't cook it first." The silence stretched before the instructor. A tall, crystalline being named Professor Valor coughed, or at least made a sound like glass tapping glass. "Humans," Valor said, "are a recent addition to the galactic exchange program. Please refrain from eating anything alive during class hours." The laughter that followed wasn't cruel, but it carried that faint tone of superiority Lucas had already gotten used to. Every species here had their own pride, their own ancient victories, and their own stories about how far they had evolved. Humanity, though, was seen as the scrappy newcomer, the primitive survivor of a dangerous world. Lucas didn't mind. He'd come to the Xiphos Academy to learn, to adapt, and maybe to surprise a few of them along the way. His first few weeks were an endless stream of lectures, zero-gravity labs, and survival simulations that felt more like alien amusement parks than challenges. The other students, from shimmering plasma beings to telepathic avians, all had their special abilities. Lucas, on the other hand, had what they called a muscle-based chassis and limited psionic potential, which was a polite way of saying, "You're strong, but dumb." They didn't mean it cruelly. It was just how the galaxy ranked species. Lucas found it funny. On Earth, humans had built machines that flew before some of these species had discovered fire. In one training session, the class practiced evasion tactics against simulated predators from various worlds. The alien students floated or phased through barriers, using energy shields or cloaking fields. Lucas simply ran, fast. Too fast, apparently. When the holographic creature, a six-legged, fanged monstrosity, lunged at him, Lucas slid beneath it, grabbed its tail, and slammed it against the virtual ground with a move that made the room fall silent. "You don't fight back?" he asked afterward, genuinely curious. "It's a simulation," one of the students, a scaled reptilian named Drakthar, said, blinking in confusion. "It's meant to test evasion and tactical retreat." "On Earth," Lucas replied, "if you run, something catches you. So you make sure it doesn't get back up." From that day, the whispers began. Some found him fascinating. Others found him terrifying. A creature that hunted predators, that fought for fun, that wasn't strategy, it was madness. But Lucas kept earning top scores, not from advanced tech or psychic might, but from raw adaptability. He watched, learned, and improvised. When Professor Valor held the interspecies combat trials, a friendly competition meant to test reflexes and cooperation, Lucas volunteered. He was paired with 3 aliens who looked at him like they'd been assigned a defective weapon. The opposing team was led by an upper-year student named Sirakel, a luminescent being with a neural lattice that allowed her to predict movements seconds ahead. The match began with energy pulses and calculated maneuvers. Lucas dodged, rolled, and took hits that would have disintegrated most species. He didn't have shields. He had grit. When Sarah's predictive field locked onto him, she smiled, ready to end it. But Lucas didn't follow patterns. He moved like chaos itself, feints, burst of motion, sudden stillness. He closed the gap and tagged her with the shock baton before her system could recalculate. The entire arena went quiet. For the first time in years, a human had beaten the Academy's reigning champion. "How did you she started. "Instinct," Lucas said. "You read minds. I read muscles." Afterward, the professors reviewed his combat feed, trying to understand how someone without enhanced perception could counter a predictive lattice. The answer was simple. He had no pattern to read. Humans didn't fight by logic alone. They fought like the world was trying to kill them every second, and for most of history, it had been. Word spread quickly. Soon Lucas wasn't just another student. He was a curiosity. Research departments wanted to study his brain. The Academy newsfeed called him the apex of Earth. Some aliens began avoiding him in the halls. Others challenged him to duels out of pride. He accepted every one, and won. But Lucas didn't want fame. He wanted respect, the kind born not from fear, but from understanding. That came one evening during a xenobiology lecture. Professor Veilor asked everyone to share how their species defined a predator. The answers were scientific, precise, sterile. When it was Lucas's turn, he leaned back in his chair and said, "A predator isn't about fangs or claws. It's about persistence. It's what happens when giving up means dying hungry." The room stayed silent. Even Veilor didn't speak for a moment. "And on your world?" the professor finally asked. "Who hunts the humans?" Lucas smiled faintly. "Everything. That's why we stopped running the next morning." He found a small crowd outside the training arena, waiting to watch him spar again. This time, it wasn't for a grade. It was for curiosity and maybe a bit of fear. By the second semester, Lucas had stopped being a curiosity and started becoming a problem. The Sci-Fi Academy prided itself on harmony among species, on calm, deliberate logic and mental discipline. Lucas didn't fit any of that. He was chaos wrapped in muscle and confidence. When other students meditated before combat simulations, he was doing pull-ups on ceiling beams. When they adjusted their neural filters to balance psychic flow, he taped his knuckles and said, "I'm good." What none of them understood was that Lucas wasn't reckless. He was deliberate. Earth had taught him that if you don't push limits, you never know where they actually are. The Academy, however, believed limits existed for a reason. It came to a head during the mid-year trials, when every student had to face the Predator Gauntlet, a live simulation of intergalactic creatures designed to test survival instincts. No one was supposed to fight. The goal was endurance and escape. Lucas didn't get that memo. The holographic jungle materialized around him, filled with thick mist and the low growl of something massive stalking nearby. His classmates used cloaking fields, phased into other dimensions, or hid behind energy barriers. Lucas picked up a rock. When the first beast, a quadruped with the metallic jaws, charged from the brush, Lucas sidestepped, drove the rock into its side, grabbed a shard of its armor, and turned it into a blade. The observers in the control room gasped as his vitals spiked but stabilized. "He's not running," said Sirakel, now assisting Professor Veilor as part of her senior mentorship. "He's adapting. He's breaking protocol," Veilor muttered, but he didn't stop the simulation. He wanted to see how far the human would go. 10 minutes later, half the holographic jungle was on fire. Lucas was bleeding from a dozen minor cuts, and the gauntlet's highest-level predator had been reduced to a sparking heap of simulated flesh. When the projection faded, Lucas stood in the middle of the smoking field, breathing hard but smiling. "You said survive," he told the stunned technicians. "I just made sure nothing else did." The footage went viral across the Academy network. Some students called it savage. Others called it genius. For the first time, the phrase Earth tactics started circulating, describing a form of combat where instinct and adaptability replaced calculated probability. The administration, however, saw a potential threat. A council of instructors met privately to discuss whether humanity should even continue in the program. "He's disruptive," said one. "Unpredictable. Or maybe just efficient," countered Veilor. "Efficiency built on destruction," another argued. "That's not evolution, it's survival addiction." The debate continued for days, but while they talked, Lucas kept training. His partner during drills was often Sirakel, who had gone from skeptic to reluctant admirer. She had tried 1,000 times to anticipate his moves, but he was a blur of misdirection. "You fight like you're always one mistake from dying," and she said after one sparring session. "That's because I usually am," he replied, half grinning. They grew close, not romantically, but through shared respect. She taught him to control his reactions, to sense energy flows instead of relying purely on instinct. In return, he taught her to break out of her predictive mindset, to improvise like a human. Together, they became the Academy's most effective combat pair. Their partnership was tested sooner than expected. One morning, the Academy's orbital alarms blared, a rare event. A fleet of unknown origin was approaching the system, broadcasting no identification codes. The faculty rushed to defense stations, and students were herded to safe zones. But Lucas, of course, didn't stay put. "Stay inside," Veilor warned through the comm. "This is not an exercise." Neither was the last time something tried to eat me, Lucas said, grabbing at his training armor. The alien students watched in disbelief as the human marched toward the docking bay. Syra caught up to him, activating her neural bands. "If you're going, I'm coming," she said. The incoming ships broke through the outer defense grid. Raiders, a species known as the Karath, who harvested tech and life forms indiscriminately. The Academy's defense drones activated, but the Karath disabled them with EMP pulses. As chaos erupted, Lucas and Syra reached the outer corridors where the first boarding party arrived. The aliens' carapaces shimmered with bioelectric arcs, their mandibles clattering as they advanced. The Academy guards fired plasma bolts. The Karath adapted instantly, absorbing the energy through their exoskeletons. "They're feeding off the weapons," shouted one guard. "So stop feeding them," Lucas said. He picked up a metal rod from the deck and charged straight into the nearest raider. The impact was brutal, the sound of bone, armor, and metal colliding. Syra tried to predict his movements, but there were none. He was pure reaction, adapting mid-motion. He used broken armor as weapons, redirected plasma bursts, and turned the enemy's strength against them. When one Karath lunged from behind, Syra threw a psychic pulse that staggered it, allowing Lucas to drive his rod through its thorax. The others hesitated. "They're backing off," she said, astonished. "They've never done that." "Predators only hunt what runs," Lucas replied, eyes locked on the retreating figures. The battle spilled into the Academy's central hall. Students from a dozen species fought to defend the command core. Lucas barked orders like a soldier who had done this before. "Don't shoot energy, they absorb it. Kinetic hits only. Use what breaks bones, not what glows." It wasn't elegant, but it worked. For every move the Kishrath made, Lucas countered with something brutally simple. When they formed shield lines, he overloaded the floor plating to collapse them. When they tried to swarm, he led them into choke points and dismantled them one by one. The Academy instructors watched in stunned silence as the human turned a panicked defense into a coordinated assault. "How does he know war tactics?" Valor asked. "He doesn't," Syra said over the comm. "He just knows how to win." Hours later, the raiders were forced to withdraw, leaving half their ships crippled in orbit. The Academy was damaged but intact. Students gathered in the Great Hall, whispering about the human who had fought without fear, who had turned the tide with nothing but instinct and stubbornness. When the headmistress arrived to address the survivors, Lucas stood off to the side, bruised and burned, but grinning faintly. She looked at him and asked, "What do you call that kind of fighting?" Lucas shrugged. "Tuesday." The laughter that followed wasn't out of mockery, it was relief. But beneath it all, something had shifted. For the first time, the galaxy's brightest minds began to see Earth's so-called primitive nature not as weakness, but as something terrifyingly effective. The word human began to mean something new in the Academy halls. The Academy never recovered its old peace after the Karath attack. Repairs were made, lectures resumed, but something had changed. The way everyone looked at Lucas Reed. The aliens didn't just see a human anymore. They saw the thing that had stood against monsters and won. It wasn't arrogance in his eyes, though. Lucas hated the attention. He came here to learn, not to become a symbol. But the universe had other plans. A month after the assault, a transmission arrived from deep space. An entire Karath fleet, far larger than before, was moving toward the Xiphos system. They weren't raiders this time. They were an army. The Academy's defenses were hopelessly outnumbered. The Council wanted to evacuate, but the system's jump gates couldn't handle the population in time. Some wanted to surrender. Others wanted to hide. Lucas just asked one question. "Where do you want me?" The staff stared at him as if he'd volunteered to wrestle a black hole. "You can't fight a fleet," Syra told him. "You're one person." "Then I'll make sure they remember that one person," he said, gripping his gear. In the chaos of preparation, he walked the corridors where he had once been mocked for eating things that fought back. Now students saluted as he passed. Even Valor approached him quietly and placed a crystalline hand on his shoulder. "You remind us why evolution began," the professor said. "To survive." The battle began when the Karath ships darkened the sky, blotting out the Academy's suns. They dropped plasma spheres that scorched the outer domes. Shields flickered and died. Panic erupted across every frequency. But Lucas didn't panic. He stood on the Academy's highest platform, staring at the descending swarm. Sarah joined him, linking her neural bands to his combat visor. "You've got my mind," she said. "Don't waste it." "Wouldn't dream of it." The first wave of enemies hit the surface like a meteor storm. Lucas dove straight into them. The Academy's drones followed his lead, syncing to his motion feed. Every move he made became a command. Every strike echoed through 100 mechanical counterparts. He wasn't just fighting, he was teaching the Academy how to fight like humans do. Dirty, clever, relentless. When energy weapons failed, he used debris. When ships deployed ground troops, he led them into the reactor tunnels, forcing them into close quarters where instinct ruled over technology. He broke through armored ranks, climbed over burning wrecks, and never stopped moving. His heart pounded like thunder. Each time he fell, Sira's voice guided him back up, recalculating paths, rerouting defenses. He wasn't invincible, but he was unstoppable. In orbit, the Academy's fleet prepared to self-destruct its primary reactors to stop the invasion. But Lucas had another idea. He hijacked a downed transport and flew straight into the heart of the Karath flagship. It was suicide, but he didn't see it that way. He saw it as home turf, another hunt. The ship's corridors were alive with armored aliens, but he fought through them like a storm tearing through glass. When he reached the central core, he planted the Academy's experimental phase core, a device meant for planetary drills. He set it to overload. As alarms blared, Sira's voice came through the comm, breaking. "You're not coming back, are you?" "I'm just giving them something to be scared of next time," Lucas said. Then the ship vanished in a flash that lit the entire hemisphere of the planet below. The Karath fleet shuddered, scattered, and fled into the void. When the light faded, the Academy was scarred, but alive. Weeks later, a new statue stood in the central hall, a simple figure holding a metal rod, looking up toward the stars. The plaque beneath it read, "He showed us what predator really means." Humanity was no longer a curiosity in the galactic community. They were a reminder that progress doesn't erase instinct, that intelligence means nothing without courage, and that sometimes survival is the most powerful technology of all. Lucas Reed became a story told in every Academy classroom, not as a warrior, but as the spark that reminded a peaceful galaxy what it meant to fight for life itself. And somewhere deep in the unknown, the stars whispered the same truth over and over. Never underestimate Earth. Did you like today's story? Then catch our posts at 3 p.m. Eastern Time daily. Unfold more intergalactic stories with Professor Space.